Hello and welcome to the 2016-2017 topic overview presented by the Washington Urban Debate League. This year's debates will focus on how the United States interacts with the largest nation on earth, China. Debates are always framed in terms of a resolution or statement. When debating affirmative, you'll support some part of this resolution, and when debating negative, you'll argue this resolution is a bad idea. This year's resolution is that the United States federal government should substantially increase its diplomatic and/or economic engagement with the People's Republic of China. In this video, we'll cover four main areas: geography, Chinese history, how the U.S. has interacted with China in the past, and issues facing modern China today. First up is geography. China is west of the United States across the Pacific Ocean. As you can see here, they share East Asia with many other nations. Be sure to note some of the major players, such as Japan, North and South Korea, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Next, we'll cover some of the history of China in 4 slides. Ancient China started along the Yangtze, or Yellow River, around the same time as other ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia or Egypt that you may be more familiar with. Early China was divided into warring kingdoms, as shown on the map. The Han Kingdom, in the center of the map, eventually conquered its neighbors and started the first Chinese Empire. This is why we call the Chinese people Han when discussing their ethnicity. During this period, a general named Sun Tzu wrote a book called The Art of War. This is one of the most influential and widely read books of all time. We still use it to teach soldiers at our military academies like West Point today. For much of its history, China has existed as a series of large, complex empires. These empires were great powers, dominating their neighbors, but were also centers of learning and science. Ancient China was responsible for things like paper and the printing press, compasses, astronomy and hot air balloons, seismographs and clocks, gunpowder and matches, pasta, and modern governing bureaucracy that we use today. A defining characteristic of Imperial China was that it was always being invaded. It's no wonder their greatest architectural achievement, the Great Wall of China, was made to defend their northern border. Mongols repeatedly invaded China from the north. The Joseon, or Korean Empire, attacked from the north and east. Japan frequently attacked by sea, and the Kingdom of Siam, modern-day Vietnam, attacked from the south. China's first experience with European imperialism was a series of humiliating defeats of what had been called the Opium Wars. China and the British Empire fought over the right of the British to sell opium, a highly addictive drug, in China. The Chinese were crushed and forced to allow the sale of this highly addictive drug to their citizens. Japan embraced the elements of Western culture, like wearing suits, and Western military advancements, like cannons and gunpowder. They used their technological superiority to dominate Asia. Soon, all of the Western European nations and Japan had forced China to carve out exclusive economic zones, where foreigners were exempt from local laws, and the local Chinese were treated as second-class citizens. Chinese and other immigrants flooded into the United States in the latter half of the 1800s, settling largely in the new state of California. Many were treated as second-class citizens and worked incredibly dangerous positions, such as building the new railroad system across the country. Despite the contributions of Chinese immigrants to the economy of Western states and to major infrastructure projects, Congress passed Chinese Exclusion Acts designed to ban immigration from Asian countries. In the early part of the 1900s, the United States began to assert itself as an imperial power in Asia. As a result of the Spanish-American War of 1898, the United States received control of the Spanish colony of the Philippines, dramatically thrusting the United States into Asian politics. The United States sailed a new state-of-the-art navy called the Great White Fleet across Asia as a bold statement that we were not to be challenged. In 1899, the United States signed the Open Door Note, which demanded China keep all of its ports open to American ships, or else. China had no choice but to comply. The history is important because it shapes how Chinese leaders think today. China's leaders see themselves as the heirs to this great imperial tradition. In Mandarin, there is a term called Tianjia, which means China's place as the center of earthly kingdoms under heaven. Imperial China was the center of the world as they knew it, and lesser countries paid them tribute. China's leaders see China's rise today as a return to their rightful place at the center of things. And their history of invasion has made China guarded and suspicious of outside powers. On the eve of World War I, modern China was born. The last empire of China was forced to retire by the army, and the Chinese Republic was formed. The nation dissolved into warring factions once again. The Chinese army, under General Chiang Kai-shek, began to unite the country. They formed the Kuomintang, China's pro-democratic political party. They sought to put down communist rebellions across the country. Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang, while corrupt, were largely successful at defeating the communists until the Japanese invaded, starting the Asian theater of World War II. In World War II, Japan joined Nazi Germany and Italy to form the Axis powers. Japan rapidly expanded its territory in Asia, capturing the Korean peninsula and much of coastal China, as you can see on the right. Their occupation was brutal, including the indiscriminate killings of civilians, regular assault of Chinese women, looting, and forced labor. As a result of the Japanese invasions, 20 to 30 million Chinese died. Japan sought to consolidate its Asian empire and keep the United States out of the war by attacking Pearl Harbor, a naval base in Hawaii. This attack, however, had the opposite effect and drew the United States into the war. The United States supported the Kuomintang against the Japanese on mainland China. Independently, communist rebels under Mao Zedong began to resist the Japanese occupation. At the end of the war, Mao and the communist forces, supported by the Soviet Union, had the upper hand both against the Japanese and against the American-backed Chinese Democrats. Chinese Republicans under Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island of Taiwan, leading to the creation of two Chinas, the People's Republic of China, the mainland nation that is part of this year's resolution, and the Republic of China, now on the island of Taiwan. The map on the right shows the retreat of Chinese Democrats to Taiwan and the forming of two separate Chinas. Communist China was governed by two main groups, the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, and the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Under Chairman Mao Zedong, China embraced socioeconomic central planning by the government in a series of 5-year plans. These were disastrous for the economy, causing widespread starvation and the collapse of many existing Chinese industries. During this time, cooperation gave way to rivalry with the neighboring Soviet Union. To distract his people from starvation and economic hardship, Mao launched a series of events called the Cultural Revolution, designed to rid his nation of Western influences. This movement encouraged workers to report their managers or for children to report their parents for capitalist actions and rejected technical expertise. Most of China's college-educated population was sent to re-education camps in rural areas where they were forced to do hard labor. This further wrecked the economy as the nation's scientists, teachers, and doctors were arrested and discredited. Many of China's current ruling class are the children of those arrested under Mao. These dramatic events during their childhood shape how they think today. In 1972, President Richard Nixon, better known for the Watergate scandals, visited mainland China, marking the first time a U.S. president has ever been to China. This visit led to the United States recognizing mainland China as a nation, instead of Taiwan, which had previously claimed to represent the entire country. This dramatically changed the balance of the Cold War, pulling China away from the Soviet Union and toward the United States. President Nixon's visit to China established U.S.-Chinese relations, paving the way for our debate topic today. Mao's failures made his rule unpopular. When he died, a reformer named Deng Xiaoping took over. Under Deng's rule, China ended the Cultural Revolution and pardoned many of the intellectuals, scientists, and politicians who had opposed Mao. Deng began to liberalize part of their economy toward a market-based system. This led to rapid economic growth that has pulled 500 million people out of poverty since 1978. China's government's legitimacy became based on this idea of economic growth instead of upon the communist ideology and fear under Mao. In this coming section, we're now going to discuss some of the issues facing modern China. These are all potential case areas for you as a debater this year. First of all, let's talk demographics. China has the largest population of any nation in the world, 1.4 billion people. The United States has only about 350 million people, 3.5 times fewer. From 1979 to 2014, China instituted a one-child policy to help control its population growth. This was wildly unpopular and frequently led to the abortion or abandoning of baby girls. There is now a large gender imbalance in China as a result. The map on the right shows how there's been a dramatic movement of population from the rural interior of the country to the highly populated and darker colored coastal provinces. Modern China is more than 91% Han Chinese, an umbrella term for many different ethnic groups absorbed by China over the centuries. Chinese Muslims, known as Uyghurs and Huis, constitute about 22 million people and live in Zhejiang, the northwest province of China, shown in yellow on the right. Tibet, formerly its own country before being captured by China, has about 5.5 million ethnic Tibetans. China has a heavy police presence in both provinces and represses religious expression by these minorities. China does not share all of the values that we do in the United States. China's government restricts their citizens' access to the internet and monitors what they say online. China has a history of jailing protesters and political opponents, rigging trials, torture, and preventing the assembly of opposition groups. China rarely respects property rights, and its taxes disproportionately impact the poor. China's economic growth under Deng Xiaoping and his successors has come with extreme costs to its environment. China is the world's largest contributor of CO2 emissions that cause climate change. Many of China's rivers are too polluted to drink from, and some are even poisonous to the touch. Air quality in major cities is horrible. In Beijing, the capital, citizens wear masks when commuting to work, such as shown on the right. To host the 2008 Olympics, China had to close its factories for weeks to improve the air quality for foreign visitors and athletes. Another result of China's economic growth is their rapidly expanding demand for energy. Access to energy resources are a top strategic priority for the Chinese government. Domestic coal reserves are being exhausted and also hurt the environment, while oil imports are increasing. One of the keys to Chinese economic growth were their decision to become the world's manufacturing powerhouse, making many of the products sold worldwide. Many factory workers, however, experience few safety precautions and poor working conditions. As China grows and tries to move up the economic ladder, they want to move away from low-level manufacturing. On the right, you can see Chinese workers making Nike shoes that some of you might be wearing while watching this video. China is the world's second largest economy by most macro measures of success, and is slowly increasing the purchasing power of its citizens to that of a middle-income nation. China is the second largest trading partner with the United States, but the U.S. has a $340 billion deficit with China. Many U.S. companies invent products and then send them to be manufactured in China, such as the iPhone. China has been accused of manipulating the value of its currency to artificially support its economy. That economy is increasingly unstable. The Chinese housing market is in a bubble similar to that the United States faced before the financial collapse in 2008, and their stock market is increasingly volatile. China has a number of geopolitical questions, none more important than the South China Sea. Shown on the right, the sea is a point of strategic contention between China and its neighbors. It is valuable as a trade route and as a potential undersea source of energy resources. Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines all have overlapping claims to the region, many of whom are U.S. allies. China is building artificial islands and military outposts in the South China Sea to press its claim, while other nations are forced to respond with military buildups of their own. China has repeatedly ignored arbitration by international bodies, which often rule against China's claim. In the Korean Peninsula, there's another source of international tension. At the end of World War II, the Korean Peninsula was divided by the U.S. and the Soviet Union, forming North and South Korea. During the Korean War, North Korea invaded the South, but the United States launched a counterattack, occupying most of North Korea before China came to its neighbor's defense. The U.S. and China fought to a standstill along the current border between the two countries. A formal treaty was never actually signed, ending hostilities between the two nations, and we've enjoyed an uneasy peace for the last 60 years. Today, the border between North and South Korea is the most highly militarized in the world. North Korea has developed nuclear weapons and frequently threatens to use them against Korea, Japan, and the United States. China is their only ally, upon whom they depend for their survival. The legitimacy of North Korea's government is based on protecting its people from the Western invasion, a relic of the devastation from the Korean War. China's identity for several centuries has been partly forged by other nations invading and at times occupying China. As a result, China is very interested in building the military capacity to prevent that from ever happening again. This military buildup also makes many neighboring countries nervous, as China has a habit of forcefully pressing its national interests. China has second-generation fighter planes and is working on developing a blue water navy with aircraft carriers, capable of operating anywhere in the world, just like the United States. China has improved its access denial capabilities, designed to potentially prevent the United States from coming to the aid of allies like Japan and Taiwan in the event of a crisis. These include anti-ship missiles, submarines, cyber warfare, and anti-satellite capabilities. China is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, the world's primary conflict resolution body. This means they have veto power over any proposed international action, which they often use or threaten to use to prevent meddling in other nations' affairs. China has a stated preference for engaging directly with nations instead of through international bodies which dilute their power. Engaging one-on-one allows them to be at a comparable advantage due to their size. Many of their Asian neighbors are aware of this and prefer to act through ASEAN, the Association through Southeast Asian Nations, so they can work together to prevent China from dominating the region. China is slowly increasing its participation in international organizations, selectively engaging on issues that might benefit it. China's return to prominence after a century of poverty and devastation as a result of its growth into a huge economic and military power, how it chooses to act internationally has become the pivotal question defining the coming century. While China was poor, an international system was built, largely without their input. This international system is built upon things like the freedom of the seas, allowing international trade, lots of international governing and conflict resolution bodies, like the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and others, and norms that discourage war. In some ways, these norms are based on Western values and advance the interests of Western nations. The big question that many international relations thinkers ask is, how will China engage with this economic system? Will they seek to change it, or will they accept a leadership role within the system as a, quote, responsible actor? So far, China has given mixed signals. They contribute heavily to United Nations peacekeeping operations and participate in the World Trade Organization. But they've also ignored international rulings and prop up rogue states like Iran and North Korea. Thank you for watching. This video is part of the Washington Urban Debate League's instructional series designed to teach novices and junior varsity students the fundamentals of policy debate. Each video has been inspired by watching our students learn and grow. If you appreciated our video, come check out our website at urbandebatewashingtondc.org or donate to your local Urban Debate League. This video was produced by WUDL Program Director David Trigo, with special thanks to our volunteers Richard Day, John Alfuth, and Kenzie Nittler for their assistance and review.